Across the Ocean Sea. A historical fiction story inspired by the voyage of Christopher Columbus, 1492. The gull cried overhead as the tide slapped against the wooden pilings of the port of Palos de la Frontera. It was still dark, too dark for merchants, too early for fishermen, but 3 ships waited in the harbor like restless animals. The Santa María, broad-bellied and heavy with provisions. The smaller caravels, Pinta and Niña, their lateen sails furled tight. Christopher Columbus stood on the dock with his cloak pulled around his shoulders. The Andalusian air was warm even before dawn, but a chill lived in him that had nothing to do with weather. 10 years of pleading, arguing, begging, and boasting had brought him here. 10 years of courts and corridors, of skeptical scholars and amused nobles, of promises that evaporated as quickly as morning fog. Now the ships were real, the men were real, and the ocean sea, as Europeans called it, waited beyond the mouth of the river, black and immeasurable. Behind him, sailors loaded barrels of fresh water and salted meat. Some muttered prayers under their breath. Others swore about delayed pay or suspicious maps. A few glanced at Columbus as though trying to decide whether he was a visionary or a madman. Columbus ignored them. He stared west. 1. The promise of a shortcut. To the scholars of Lisbon and Salamanca, the world was already known in outline. Earth was round, educated Europeans accepted that, but its size was debated fiercely. Columbus believed Asia lay much closer westward than most calculations allowed. If he could reach Cipangu, Japan, or the wealthy lands of Cathay described by Marco Polo, Spain would gain spices, silks, and gold without navigating Portuguese-controlled routes around Africa. Portugal dismissed him. So had England. So had several Spanish councils, until at last King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, flush with victory after conquering Granada in 1492, agreed to gamble. They gave Columbus 3 ships, a modest crew, and extravagant titles if he succeeded: Admiral of the Ocean Sea, Viceroy and Governor of any lands he claimed. It was more than he had ever held in his life. It was everything he could lose. 2. Into the unknown. On August 3, 1492, the ships slipped from Palos and headed south to the Canary Islands, where repairs and fresh rigging delayed them for weeks. There, the Pinta's rudder cracked. Some sailors whispered sabotage, fearing the voyage before it truly began. By September 6th, the 3 vessels left the Canaries and pushed into waters no European expedition had charted. The Atlantic opened wide. Day after day, the horizon refused to change. Winds carried them steadily westward. Sargassum seaweed drifted past in floating fields, unsettling the crew, proof, some thought, that they were nearing shallow waters or the edge of the world. Columbus kept 2 sets of logs. One recorded the true distances sailed. The other, the one he shared, shortened them. He knew fear traveled faster than wind. 3. Murmurs on deck. By October, tension soaked into every plank. The men had been promised riches, not endless water. They worried about currents that would prevent their return, about monstrous creatures rumored to inhabit distant seas, about dying nameless in waters no priest had blessed. On the Santa María, Martín Alonso Pinzón, captain of the Pinta and an experienced navigator, argued openly with Columbus about course changes. The Pinzón brothers had helped recruit crews and outfit ships. Now even they were uneasy.
One evening, as the sun bled into the ocean, a sailor named Rodrigo leaned against the rail and whispered to another, "If he keeps us sailing west, we'll never see Castile again." Columbus overheard. He said nothing, just tightened his grip on the astrolabe at his belt. At night, he studied stars unfamiliar in their patterns, wondering whether heaven itself was changing shape as they crossed into regions no Christian had measured. Still, he pressed forward. 4. Signs in the water. On October 7th, birds appeared, small land birds, not seabirds that slept on waves. Branches drifted by, freshly cut. A carved stick bobbed past the hull. Land was near. The men cheered, then argued when nothing rose on the horizon the next day. On October 10th, the crew reached the edge of revolt. Voices rose, threats followed. Some demanded to turn back before supplies dwindled further. Columbus called them together. He spoke not like a dreamer, but like a commander. 3 more days, he promised. If land did not appear, they would return. Privately, he prayed harder than he ever had in his life. 5. Tierra! 2 nights later, just after midnight, on October 12, 1492, a cry split the darkness. "Tierra! Tierra!" Rodrigo de Triana, lookout on the Pinta, pointed into the moonlit distance. A low shape hovered above the waterline. Columbus fell to his knees. The ships slowed, anchors dropped, and dawn revealed a green island ringed with pale beaches and palms bending in warm wind. They had crossed an ocean no European expedition had ever traversed so directly. Columbus believed, absolutely, that he had reached islands near Asia. He dressed in scarlet and gold before stepping ashore. 6. The island called Guanahani. The landing party waded through shallow surf, banners held high. Columbus planted the royal standard of Castile and Aragon in the sand and named the island San Salvador. The people who watched from behind trees and rocks called it Guanahani. They were Taíno, men and women with copper-toned skin, dark hair, and curious eyes. Many wore little clothing, decorated with feathers or beads. They carried simple spears tipped with fishbone. Columbus wrote later they seemed gentle, generous, quick to trade. Glass beads and bells fascinated them. Gold, tiny ornaments in their noses, fascinated Columbus. Through gestures and tentative words, he asked where the metal came from. They pointed south. 8. Across the Caribbean. The expedition sailed on, weaving through what we now know as the Bahamas, Cuba, and Hispaniola. Columbus believed Cuba might be part of mainland Asia. He even forced crewmen to swear statements that it was so. In Hispaniola, relations with the Taíno were initially peaceful. Chiefs, caciques, offered food, cotton thread, and parrots. But misunderstandings multiplied. Europeans came with iron blades, armor, and horses, animals unknown in the Caribbean. They spoke of kings and claims and crosses. When the Santa María ran aground on Christmas Day, wrecked by reef and current, Columbus ordered a fort built from its timbers, La Navidad. 39 men stayed behind. It was the first European settlement in the Americas. It would not last. 8. Return to Spain. In January 1493, the Niña and Pinta turned eastward, battered by storms that nearly tore them apart. At one point, Columbus sealed a letter describing his discoveries in a barrel and threw it into the sea, hoping history might find it if he did not. He survived. Spain erupted in wonder. Exotic birds, gold fragments, painted people, tales of islands overflowing with promise. Columbus paraded through Barcelona before Ferdinand and Isabella like a prophet returned from the edge of the world. They authorized a second voyage immediately, larger, grander, unmistakably colonial. The world had changed. Europe simply did not yet understand how much. 9. The other side of discovery. For the Taíno and countless other indigenous peoples, the arrival of Europeans would not feel like discovery. It would feel like invasion. Disease, smallpox, measles, influenza traveled faster than armies, devastating populations with no immunity. Forced labor systems followed. Gold hunger sharpened cruelty. Entire societies fractured under pressures they could not have imagined. Columbus himself, once celebrated, struggled as governor. His rule